Hi everyone, Bob Dietrich here with another edition of the ADHD Toolbox, and we are here with Roxanne Jarrett. Roxanne, welcome to our program. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here because we're talking today about creativity, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship. And if you are a parent looking to, and you have kids, or if you're an adult, this is going to be a relevant conversation for both of you, or even a teacher looking for how to work with their students. Because we're going to talk about a couple things toward the end of the conversation, which are, how do we prepare our children for entrepreneurship? And if you're an adult, how can entrepreneurship release your creativity? But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about creativity and how it can be healing. And Roxanne is an expert in that area, and we want to dig as much into that as possible to understand the connection between creativity, entrepreneurship, and ADHD. So, Roxanne, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in ADHD in this field and helping people with ADHD?
Well, I live with ADHD myself, and I struggled a lot in school.
Hmm.
But by the time I got to college, and I went to college pretty young, I was 16 when I went, I struggled the first year and I was on academic probation. But because I didn't want to go home, um, I developed so many different strategies to help me make it through school. And I finished college in 4 years on the dean's list. And I have just been using techniques to help myself and help others from then on. And I went into education after I finished college, and I studied educational theater and did a lot of work in arts and education. And I've discovered many ways to help people learn, help people to sustain attention through creative means. And so that's where I'm coming from.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I happen to know that you're a singer and a coach. You perform in 5 different languages. What languages do you perform in?
Well, English,
Yeah.
Spanish, Hebrew, Italian, and Jamaican Patois.
Wow, that's awesome. And
Mhm.
so you sing in these, do you do stage performances like in a play, or is it an opera, or what format do you?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff. I played Fruma Sarah and Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh,
um, and I sing on stage with bands and solo, as well as street perform.
wow, that's awesome. And so,
Mhm.
and you also provide one-on-one intensive services to help creative entrepreneurs with ADHD finish their projects. Um,
Yes.
you are an art director, or an art educator, I should say, and you
Mhm.
facilitate workshops in various subjects, including acting and videography, writing, Shakespearean language, authentic relating.
Mhm.
And this is awesome because you're the perfect person to be talking about creativity and entrepreneurship together. So let's dig into the first part of this conversation, because you and I talked before we started the interview, and we talked a little bit about the healing power of creativity and ADHD. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that so we understand the connection there and how powerful creativity is for moms trying to help their kids, or adults just trying to overcome the ADHD?
Okay, great. So creativity is healing. And I think it is an excellent path for anyone to follow who is living with low self-esteem, feelings of low self-worth,
Mhm.
um, depression, or any kind of mood disorder, whether it's high functioning depression, or functioning depression, or clinical severe depression. Um, because once somebody follows their creative interests, they get to express themselves, and they get to take ideas from their minds into the world. And when you do that, you have now tangible proof of your worth and of your value.
What I notice with people with ADHD, they struggle in creating positive experiences for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And when you struggle with creating positive experiences for yourself, you wind up having these negative beliefs about yourself. So when you
Mhm.
when you do the creativity part, which you're bringing to mind here, it's like,
Mhm.
wow, you get to have this positive experience about yourself that is just so amazing, and it really boosts your ego, boosts your, not your ego, but your, your sense of self, your self worth, and now you have this positive part to go out into the world and say, hey, I'm valuable, and I'm awesome, and
Absolutely. So I started, for example, making beaded jewelry in my early 20s. But a few years later, I was in the height, or well, maybe even the depths of clinical depression.
Mhm.
And I started to sculpt beads instead of buying beads to assemble. And what I found, Bob, is that I could pour my feelings into my sculpting.
Mhm.
And I was forming clay, but I was also representing my emotions through color and through texture. And it did a couple of things for me. It built my self-esteem because I had, again, that tangible proof of my own self-worth, of my value, because I'm seeing something that I made and
Right.
I'm saying, hey, I am powerful, I am valuable, I can contribute something to the world that no one has ever seen before. And it's not that no one has ever seen a bead or that no one has ever seen a sculpted bead, but nobody is going to produce what you produce in exactly the same way.
Right.
Everything that a person produces is unique. No one is going to cook a stew or trim a tree or draw a portrait exactly the way that you are. And
Right.
so when you have the opportunity to produce creative work and see your value and your uniqueness, that is an incredible boost to your self-esteem.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
that is kind of the theme of what we're doing with this second toolbox here, is we are focusing on the brilliant part of the ADHD mind that is hidden inside and often struggles to get out. But when it's managed and when ADHD controlled and focused, it can come through like gangbusters. And what we're talking about is the creative side, and what you're talking about is how the creative side actually just lifts the ADHD mind up, lifts the whole beingness of that person, and helps them just create more and just feel better about themselves.
Absolutely. And the second thing it did, Bob, for me is that it brought me an income.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, because the work actually spoke to people, and maybe it's because at that time and in that place, it was the right medium for me. And it spoke to people, and I moved up from being an individual vendor of jewelry to manufacturing a line and selling to stores in New York City. And that all came out of severe clinical depression
Mm.
and immersing myself into a creative art form.
Wow. And
Yeah.
that's what a great segue into where we're going, because a
Mhm.
lot of these people, a lot of people with ADHD, um, they don't thrive in this corporate environment where they got mundane tasks to do over and over again. They thrive in like what you're talking about, where they can be creative, where they can be musicians, or they can be artists, or they can be these thinkers that create new ways of building uh, whatever businesses or whatever. And so when they're put into those situations, they thrive, which I think is why entrepreneurship is so uh, people with ADHD are so drawn to entrepreneurship. Would you say that's true?
I would say it's absolutely true. My understanding is up to entrepreneurs have about about 6 times more likely to have ADHD than the general population.
Wow.
And if that is true, I think it's about 4 to 6 times more likely.
Mhm.
That's just showing you that going in the direction of your interests is very attractive for people with ADHD and often necessary for their livelihood.
Got it. Got it.
Hmm.
So if you're a teacher out there and you have students and they have ADHD, or you're a mom that has a child with ADHD, or even if you're an adult with ADHD, you could be the next Einstein, or the next Thomas Edison, or Richard Branson, more specifically with regard to entrepreneurs, because those are the types of people, that's the way they think, and that's kind of who they are. So that's awesome stuff. So let's talk about two of the things that we kind of foreshadowed here in the beginning of our program. First thing was children. Our children grow up, we wonder what they're going to be. Are they going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a fireman or whatever, right? A lot of times, though, we don't think entrepreneur unless the dad or mom is an entrepreneur, and then it's like it's natural. But what can parents do to kind of nurture their children toward entrepreneurship as they're growing up, and knowing their ADHD, and they're likely to end up in that place anyway?
That's an excellent question, Bob. So first of all, I want to say that we should absolutely nurture our children toward entrepreneurship, or I think it's very beneficial to do so. But preparing a child for entrepreneurship is not the same as pushing a child into entrepreneurship or making a definite decision about your child's future. Yes, what I would suggest any parent of an ADHD child do is set your child up for entrepreneurial success. So should they choose to go in the direction, they are well prepared in that regard. And if they don't choose to go in that direction, they still learn valuable lessons that they can take into any part of their life.
Got it. Yeah, I totally agree. I've been in entrepreneurship for over 20 years, and it just helps you in so many ways, so many different directions. So yes, I totally agree with that. So so as far as preparing our children, what are some specific things that we could do as parents to prepare our children?
Yeah. So I would say number one is put your child in a position where they can go as deeply or as far into their area of interest as possible. Allow them to explore anything that they're excited about. And go ahead.
I was going to say, we were talking about that with one of our other speakers, is that what she uses instead of the punishment method, she uses kind of this freedom method, and give them freedom and allow them to move into the direction that they want to, and then nurture that direction. Because what we're learning about ADHD is that it's not an attention deficit, it's an interest deficit. So if they're not interested, they ain't going to do it.
Right.
But if they're interested, they have hyper focus, right? And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is this nurture that and help them go in there.
Absolutely. There's a question I would suggest every parent ask, and that is, am I putting my child in a position to learn in a way that's tailored specifically to my child, right? Because for example, I'll give you an example of my daughter. My daughter likes to draw. She's always been a visual artist. And at a certain point, I put her in an art class at a studio that was highly regarded. And my daughter didn't thrive there. But she did thrive in other situations. And when I looked at it, most of the young people that were in that class were doing very well, but they learned in a particular way that wasn't suited to my daughter. So when I looked into it, I realized that's not the place for her, and that I needed to find another way for her to learn the basics of drawing. But you always look into things as a parent, and ask yourself if your child is resisting because your child doesn't want to engage the difficult, because that happens too. So as my child got older and went to high school, she studied graphic design. And I went to back to school night, and I was already told there was a learning curve, and that it's often difficult in the first few weeks, but then it gets fun. But see, my daughter wanted to drop out of graphic design in the first few weeks because it was difficult.
Right.
but I knew that she loved to create, and I knew that she loved to design. And so she needed to pick up the technical skills. And I saw that the way the teacher taught was that step-by-step, hands-on, experiential learning style that works for my daughter. And so I didn't allow her to drop out. And she ended up with an A grade, consistent A grades in graphic design once she got over that hump.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, as parents, we make decisions. Sometimes the decisions are tough, and we never know if the decision we made is the quote unquote right decision. But what I would suggest to every parent is to just look at all the things that you know, and then check in with your gut and what you know of your child, and make that decision whether you're going to push your child into doing something even though it's difficult, or realize this is just not the place for my child.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as you were talking. It's, you know, how do you tell the difference between whether a child is just not doing it because it's difficult or not? And you just gave us the answer. It's like checking what you got. You know your child, you know what they're doing, and you might just want to give them a little nudge in that direction. Sometimes that's all it takes to get them over that hump so they can be in that creative space. Because yeah, there's a learning curve with everything, and getting started sometimes can be the hardest part.
Yeah, and another thing I would say to parents is, and this is a big one, okay,
Right.
Especially the way the society is going right now, right, is allow your child to not be an expert.
Allow them to not be an expert. Allow them to not know everything about a subject.
Everybody develops at their own pace, and so not every child is going to be a child prodigy, and that's okay. Let them tinker, let them explore, and if you have a child who doesn't seem to have a marketable skill, so to speak, encourage them to do whatever it is that they impulsively do. As long as it's not too disruptive, and each person has to decide what that means to them, you know, what's right, what's best for their family, you know, even sometimes moment to moment. But for example, I'm going to bring up my daughter again. When she was younger, she messed around with adhesives, right? Because I have a lot of adhesives in my house, and she messed around with the adhesives. I thank goodness kept her out of the epoxy so she didn't glue her hands together, but she would just play with them, paints and dyes and tints, and she often didn't do anything much with them besides play with them. She didn't necessarily finish projects that she started, but I allowed her to play as long as it didn't get too disruptive to me, and that varied from moment to moment. But as she grew up and as her prefrontal cortex developed, she knew how to create certain effects by combining mediums. And she was able to create solutions for technical issues or technical problems that came up in the creation of larger art projects, because she knew how things worked, and she often knew the things that weren't going to work.
Right.
Yeah. So my daughter was not some big expert. She was not the best visual artist growing up. She wasn't necessarily quote unquote the best at anything, but she did have the space to explore and to just go in the direction of her interest, even if that's just putting her hands in clay and mixing it with other things.
That's awesome. So you letting her be free and doing what she wanted allowed her to build certain technical skills that she wouldn't have otherwise learned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So don't worry if your child is not a child prodigy, or if your child's not an expert at the violin or rocket science or whatever it is. Allow them to explore and allow them to go in the direction that they impulsively will go to.
Fantastic.
Or compulsively, yes.
Yeah, great advice. I love that. So let's talk about the adults now. So we talked about the children, how to prepare your child for entrepreneurship. Um, Great advice there. Now, let's say you're an adult and you want to unleash that creativity and move into entrepreneurship, or maybe you're already an entrepreneur. How can you adults unleash their creativity?
All right. Well, explore in the direction of your interest,
Hmm.
or if you don't seem to have a particular interest or anything pulling on your heartstrings, then try different things and see what develops. It might seem like a simple answer, and sometimes the simple answers are the most effective. So that is what I would suggest for adults. And I would remind adults to pay attention. This might sound a little hocus pocus, but pay attention to what you dream about. Because what you work on most intensely in the daytime often infiltrates your dreams. And for example, when I was decorating my house, it was like a 6-week art installation. Like, I wanted to decorate the whole house in 6 weeks, and I didn't know everything about what I was going to do. And I might look at a window and say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And go to sleep and dream a sheer orange curtain, which I did. And so if you're exploring and you're not quite sure, pay a little closer attention to the things that you dream about. That might give you some clues about what to explore or what direction to go in your waking hours.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mom passed away a couple of months ago, and it was a difficult time for me, and it still is. But one of the things I did was it was around Christmas time that this happened, and I had bought for my nephew, I bought this little paint by numbers thing. And I thought it was cool because it had whales and dolphins in it, one of those pictures. And I got it in the mail, and it was like, there's no way he's going to be able to do this. He's like 8 years old. So it's like, all right, I got to send it back. And then I thought about it for a little while, and I thought, I kind of would like to do this. So I started doing it, and it really kind of unleashed some creativity. But it also helped me, for some strange reason. It helped me heal with my mother. And I had talked to people in bereavement counseling. It seemed, and that's part of one of the things they do, is they do painting projects and stuff. And so it was kind of cool that this simple creativity task helped me heal, and gave me kind of this outlet and calmed me down. What do you think about stuff like that? Is that kind of a normal occurrence? Is that what you see a lot?
It is. It's expression, right? And when you express, you are releasing. And so certain things are harder to put into words. And everyone is unique in their expression. Someone can express in colors what is difficult in words. Jimi Hendrix was like that. And so for healing, again, like I mentioned, it is to go in the direction of your interest and see what develops. And another thing I would say to adults is that creativity is not necessarily visual arts or writing or painting or crafts. It can be solving a nagging problem. So Arthur Fry, who worked for 3M, he invented the Post-it note. And really what he was trying to do was he was trying to mark the pages in his hymnal when he was in church, in a way where the paper wouldn't fall out all the time, but also a way that he could stick something in there that wouldn't destroy the pages of his hymnal. And so because he worked for 3M, he was aware of a failed adhesive that was invented a number of years before, maybe about 6 or 8 years prior, that was never marketed because it was a failed experiment. But it had that slight stickiness that kind of worked. And so because that was top of mind for him, and because he had this nagging problem, he went and employed that adhesive to create the Post-it note. And 3M was actually hesitant to put this thing out on the market. And it turned out to be such a lucrative product for 3M. And it was really to solve a nagging problem. So anyone who is looking to go into entrepreneurship and looking to explore their creativity can also think about what gets under their skin. Ask yourself, what gets under my skin? What is a nagging problem that I'd like to solve? Or what's an injustice that I'd like to correct? That is a great direction for adults to go in, to explore their creativity, because creativity is endless, and it's not just what we often consider to be art.
Yeah, I love that. So they took a failure and they turned it into this mega million.
Massive success.
Yeah, massive success.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that you probably have things like that in your life where it didn't work one place, but it can work another. And you know, it's interesting because I do improv weekly. I practice improv weekly. Super fun, but it helps with the way I think, right? It helps me with what they call divergent thinking, right? So that's thinking about how do you use something in a different way, and how do you think outside the box, as opposed to say, this sticky thing doesn't work, so we throw it out. So it's like the divergent thinking is saying, well, we got this Post-it note here, and because of the way it sticks, you know, it's gonna, you know,
there it goes.
A product, right? Exactly.
Right.
I'm here. So, so yeah, so that's what divergent thinking is, and it sounds like that's what we're talking about too. I'll bet ADHD people with ADHD are great divergent thinkers.
Absolutely. So, and going back to those valuable lessons for the children, for the parents whose children, who want to prepare their children for entrepreneurship, and also for the adults who are exploring their creativity, even if you do not end up becoming an entrepreneur, exploring your creativity teaches you valuable lessons about improvisational skills, like what you just mentioned, the hyper focus that you can achieve when you follow your passions, which is great for children to learn, especially children who feel like they're failing at being able to focus on something that they're really just not interested in school, to see like, wow, I really can focus. I really can create something unique and contribute to the world, and become a creative problem solver. So that is a lesson for adults and children. Just get creative by any means necessary.
Right. And you know, this could easily be a conversation about boosting your confidence too, I think.
Absolutely.
That we could have had this whole thing and it could have been focused on, hey, you want to learn how to boost your confidence, be creative. And or you want to heal yourself, you want to go into entrepreneurship. Creativity is a problem solver that solves on many levels. So thank you so much for this information. This has been amazing and a great reminder. I think intuitively we all understand that creativity is the answer to a lot of our problems, or a lot of our feelings, or the negativity that's in our life, but we don't use it, and we don't use it as our go-to. And I think what we're saying here, what you're saying is, as an expert, is, you know, go to your creativity when you're down. Go to your creativity when you need the answers, and especially if you're a parent, guide your children toward creativity.
Yes, we need it. We need it. And what I would say to anybody with ADHD is that you are capable of going in the direction of your creativity and being successful at it. And you 100% deserve to earn your living doing something that you absolutely adore. That's
awesome. Well, thank you for your inspiration and for the example that you set for so many, especially children in our community. So you also have a free gift here. And tell us a little bit about the free gift that people can get.
Sure.
Just below this.
Yeah, so for anyone who's watching, who feels like they want to get this, get a creative project off of the ground and is looking for guidance on how to get your ducks in a row, visit momentummeetings.com and you can get a free video guide to master your creative productivity in 5 rule-bending steps. So, and it's a video guide because as a person with ADHD and dealing with people with ADHD, I noticed that a lot of times we prefer the video and the audio, like we're here on video right now. And so it's a video guide. It's a blueprint that you can get. MomentumMeetings.com, just hit the download button.
Got it. And we have that button just below this video for you. So for your convenience, so just click on that button, get that download. And if you have any questions for Roxanne, you can reach her at Roxanne at roxannejarrett.com. That's JARRETT. So roxannejarrett.com. Or you can go to roxannejarrett.com and check out the information that she has there. Make sure you download that. And thank you so much, Roxanne, for being on our program. This has been an awesome conversation and great reminder how important creativity is for ourselves and for our children.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. And thank you all for watching this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. We will see you on the next episode.